discussing the Mountain West Championship scenarios heading into Week 14. Championship season is almost here, so we're back on the Big Mountain to bring you an update. Hey, JY back with the Big Mountain. We got a little clarification on Saturday as it relates to the Mountain West Football Championship game. Of course, UNLV beat Hawaii and Utah State beat Fresno State there in the Valley, but there's still a lot of scenarios to cover, so let's get into it. Let me just say these first couple scenarios are based on UNLV beating Nevada. All right, if they lose, UNLV's totally out. So this is based on UNLV beating Nevada. The easiest scenario here is if San Diego State and Boise State both win their games on Saturday. Those will be the two teams in the Mountain West Championship game, and it will be played down in Southern California at Snapdragon Stadium. Now, if San Diego State wins, but Boise loses to Utah State, then UNLV will travel down to Southern California for the Mountain West Championship game. Now, the fun really begins. If New Mexico beats San Diego State, and that line on that game right now via Vegas is only about 1.5 points. So this should be a close game if you believe the Vegas odds. But if UNM beats San Diego State and both Boise and UNLV lose, then there will be a rematch of the Lobos and the Aztecs on December 5th back in Albuquerque. Now, if UNM wins and UNLV also wins against Nevada, but Boise loses, New Mexico will host the championship game, and metrics will have to determine who they play, either the Aztecs or the Rebels. I will get into those metrics here in a little bit. If UNM, Boise, and UNLV win their games, there will be a 4-way tie, and metrics are going to need to be used to determine who's in the championship game. Again, if New Mexico, Boise, and UNLV win this Saturday, there'll be a 4-way tie, all of these teams having 2 losses in conference, and we have to go to the metrics. More on those metrics in a minute. There are other scenarios for 5-3 teams and teams that have records of 5-3. They're very unlikely. They're way messier. That includes Hawaii. That includes Utah State. They're technically not out of it yet, but I'm going to just stick with the 4 teams and the scenarios I just gave you because they are by far the most likely and the games that you should be paying the most attention to. But I do just want to say there is a path, a technical mathematical path for Hawaii and Utah State to be able to get into a tiebreaker scenario to use those metrics. But the metrics for those 2 schools are below the other 4 schools that I'm talking about here. I don't see them, even if we get to use the metrics, I don't see them getting in here. I think they're basically off the table at this point. But again, technically they're not. So I got to bring that up. So I want to talk about what this means for each of these 4 teams. I'm going to break down San Diego State, Boise State, New Mexico, and UNLV. Of course, San Diego State, absolutely the easiest situation. They win the game versus New Mexico. They're in the championship, and they host the championship. If they lose against New Mexico, they still may be in, depending upon other wins and losses, or they may need to go to the metrics. So San Diego State here, they're not a sure in right now, but they're about as a sure in as you can get. And if they win the game, absolutely done deal. If Boise State wins their game, they then have to play San Diego State, assuming San Diego State wins. If San Diego State loses, then Boise and San Diego State will go to the metrics, which that keeps UNLV alive if they win. UNLV has to win against Nevada. They also need Boise to lose to Utah State. If Boise beats Utah State, they must have UNM beat San Diego State and go to the metrics in order to have a chance. So UNLV really kind of needs the most help from other teams, if you will, whereas the other three teams, they control more of their destiny than what UNLV does. Let's talk about New Mexico. They also hold their fate in their hands, just like San Diego State. That's why this game is going to be so huge coming up on this weekend in Albuquerque. If UNM wins and Boise loses, they are in versus San Diego State or UNLV. So UNM wins, Boise loses, the Lobos are in. Not necessarily sure who they play, but they're in. If the Lobos win and Boise wins, then again, it has to go to a three-way tie metrics to see who gets into the championship game. And, you know, we'll get to those metrics here in a little bit. So San Diego State holds their fate in their hands pretty much 100%. Well, it is 100%. They win, they're in, completely control their own fate. New Mexico holds a lot of their fate in their hand. I'm going to give them an 80-90% shot. You know, if they win that game, it's very likely that the Lobos get into the Mountain West Championship game. Boise also has a high degree of holding their own fate, but they're guaranteed to get in with a San Diego State win. So those three teams definitely hold more control than, like I said earlier, UNLV. They need the most help here. They need San Diego State or Boise State to lose. One of those two teams has to lose in order for UNLV to have a shot of getting in the Mountain West Championship game. And even with San Diego State losing, UNLV still needs to have the metrics go in their favor to get in the game. So a little bit more of a kind of a maneuvering for UNLV than I'm sure their fans would really like to have. So let's look at these metrics. I did these metrics last week. I showed you 7 schools. I'm only going to show you 4. You know, the top 4, the ones that we've been talking about here, and they are very, very close. I've updated these given the past results from this past week. So San Diego State barely stays at the top of these rankings. And remember, this is only 3 of the 4 metrics that are used. The SP+, the SOR, and the KPI. They're all publicly available information that I can get, and I'm using them here in these metrics. The other one is a publication that you have to have a subscription to. I don't have that, and so we don't know what this 4th metric is. But we get a pretty good idea of where these schools are at. So San Diego State at the top by just a whisker. UNLV and Boise State basically tied right now. UNLV, with that win over Hawaii, really improved their metrics here. And Boise's been pretty consistent. You know, they had that win against Colorado State. That's what they expected to happen. So their metrics did increase and get slightly better, but UNLV's had the biggest jump here. And then New Mexico right now is the 4th best in metrics, but if they beat San Diego State, you're going to have a big swing between the Aztec metrics and the Lobo metrics. So what does this mean if New Mexico beats San Diego State? It likely means we are going to have to use these metrics to determine who is in the championship game. And what I'm seeing in these metrics looks like a razor thin margin. So things are becoming very interesting in the Mountain West. All eyes on that New Mexico San Diego State game. And we'll see what happens on Friday and on Saturday. With that, hey, thank you guys for watching this. Hopefully I cleared some of that up for you. Of course, we do our pick episode Wednesday evening. I will pick every Mountain West game against the spread. Would love to have you on for that. And with that, hey, thank you guys for watching this episode. Smash that like button. Subscribe if you like our content. And I'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.